Hello,
Cool.
everyone. I'm Lisa T. Conaway. I used to be a member artist of the Island Artist Gallery, and I'm a consignment artist at the moment. So I'm still got my foot in the door there, and I'm really excited to be presenting to you guys today. I went ahead and got the artists or the gallery going on Inktober with our own prompts. So I've been following along with the prompts for all of Inktober so far. There's one that I've skipped up on a little bit. But I'll be doing the 13th, that's today, the prompt for today with you all. And just wanted to introduce myself a little bit and talk about drawing. If everybody can see my screen share, you can give a little thumbs up or let me know. Awesome. And if anybody has any questions along the process or now or whenever, feel free to shoot it in the chat box or let us know somehow, and I'll try and answer them as we go. But basically, I've been drawing since I can remember and a little addicted to it. So it's been a good thing for me. And I really love ink. Ink has always been my go-to since I can remember. It's just a really fun medium to get a really high contrast and do some fun pieces with. And Inktober is a really great excuse to develop some good drawing habits and keep yourself motivated and moving forward. And we've been doing a whole bunch. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the things that I've done so far this month. So this was our first one. It was, I think, ocean waves and then autumn harvest. And if anybody wants to see anything up close, let me know. But in here you can see some of the hatching technique, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but that's just the little fine line detail there. And when you layer them on top of themselves, and that's cross hatching, but just different ways to get some detail and shading into your pieces. That's a self-portrait I did. A feather. And this one has some interesting detail. I was trying to get the idea of the fluffy down feather part on the bottom here. And so trying to keep it fluffy and light. And that can be a challenge sometimes with pen because it's so stark sometimes. But when you get to know your medium and you get to know whatever style of pen that you choose to use, you figure out different ways of using it to make it do different techniques that you want it to do. Another thing that I really like to do and add into my shading is called stippling, and that's just little tiny dots. This is a good example of that. You can see the shadow that the leaf is casting there. That's all stippling, and so it's just little dots, just lots of little dots. And I like to do contrasting shadows or shading. So with this one, oh, my camera froze, I think. With this one, you can see that the lines on the leaf itself are hatching and cross hatching, and then the shadow cast from the leaf is all stippling. And I like to just have that contrast going a lot because that is just fun and more interesting to me. I'm going to try and alter my camera. I don't know why it froze here. Okay. I'm just quickly trying to flip that. No. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So again, cross-hatching, stippling. This one I haven't finished yet. I'm like slowly working around and filling in. That's another way to get some really high contrast in some images. The smoke on this one, that's all stippling. I had a lot of fun doing that, trying to do wavy lines and have it really kind of different and unique in some sense. Again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try and answer them as we go here. Let me see if I have my chat pulled up. I do. And then also, if you guys pull up your chat, you can see that I added in an image in there that is the base of what I'm going to be working on tonight. I think this one was last night. So it's coming out of the mist, And so you should be able, you don't see anything in the chat. Okay, let me try and add that in again real quick. Okay, it should be downloading now. You should be able to download that onto your computer. So that was last night right here. I did print out a copy of it though. So today's prompt is called The Ancient Ones. And I took this picture about 4 years ago or so. I had the opportunity to go to Anchorage and I visited the art museum. This is a stone sphere that's just over a foot in diameter, I would say, and it's got a really shallow relief carving of a face on it, and it's got lichen growing around it, and I fell in love with it. I thought it was just so cool. Try recording video internally on your phone. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm reading the chat too. So I'm going to do that with my phone really quick, so bear with me. We'll go to video and we'll go to recording and we'll just see if it wants to flip one more time, and no. Okay. All right. So again, I got to see this piece in life, and it was really stunning and just really kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And I always kind of wanted to have an excuse to do it. So today I figured was a great excuse, because the prompt for today is The Ancient Ones, and this is really ancient. I did a tiny bit of research on it, and it was found in Nunavik Island, and underneath it, just in the soil there, they found some whale vertebrae and some pieces of wood, and they were able to carbon date those. And approximate dating for that was 1650. So it is pretty ancient, pretty old there, but it just resonates with me, and it has a lot of kind of deep symbolic meaning there that I thought was really beautiful and mysterious at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this piece and talk you through the process as I go. Art is one of those beautiful things in life where there's no wrong way to really do a piece. I'm going to try and get this in here at the same time so you guys can see that while I work. When I do pieces, I try and have a lot of reference material, and in this case I don't have a lot because I don't have the subject in front of me, and so I'm working off of an older photo, so that can be kind of limiting in some senses. So if I am working off of photos, I try and do multiple photos. In this case, I was able to find a branch with some lichen on it. There we go, we focused in there. And so I'm going to use this as some of my reference for the detail of the lichen that's growing on the stone itself. Because it can be challenging sometimes to take a 4-dimensional object and try and put that onto a 2-dimensional plane and make it look good or real or how you want it to look. So if you're working on something that you don't have reference for, you don't have live reference for, get as many photos as you possibly can. The more information, the better, to try and make that transition. The pens
Lisa, we got, yeah, pens and paper. What kind of pens and paper do you use?
So this is actually the sketchbook that I'm using here. This is moleskin. It's a really nice big moleskin, so it's really fancy. I've owned it for a couple of years and I haven't wanted to touch it because it was so nice. but I like smoother textured paper for the most part. So oftentimes I use Bristol board. And that's a really great illustrating paper. You can put watercolors on it, but it takes markers and pens really well. And pens are my go-to. So that's like a really nice smooth one that I really like. And yeah, even if I'm working with watercolors, I don't do that very often. I still lean towards the smoother toothed paper than not. And I like the thicker stuff. So Bristol board's really nice because it's super smooth and it's like really sturdy. It's like really thick construction construction paper kind of. So that's my favorite for the paper. And this is actually my go-to pen. I know it's a Sharpie, which is kind of funny, but it's like the Sharpie Stylus Pro pen, I guess. It's got about an 8.8 millimeter nib on it. I don't know if it's not really focusing very well. Doesn't want to focus on me. But it's just a felt tip. I've used quill nibs in the past, and I've dipped ink in the past, and I do really like working with that. This is my ink that I use when I am using a nib, but it can get a little messy and it's not as consistent. And I feel like that's more like when I have a lot of time to dedicate to just sit in the studio and just do it and absorb the process. And if I'm packing my art supplies around with me and doing it on the couch, then I'm using my Sharpie. The Sharpie's the go-to because I don't have to really worry about bits and or drips and things like that. But I have used nibs in the past, and my nibs, I don't know, I don't have them on hand. I have one right here. It's super basic. It's just like, I think it's Speedball is the brand, and you can get it like a little starter kit with really simple nibs on it. This is like your medium go-to simple nib, and it works really well. I like it. It's really sharp, so you have to be careful sometimes when you're reaching for it. I've stabbed myself before, but it's just a cheapo plastic handle for it. But I mean, it works, it does the job, and it's fun to play around with. I do really like playing around with them. They're just a little on the messy side. So if you're using this, I would highly recommend having a scrap piece of paper off to the side that you can like scratch out your ink on and then work on your drawing. Because if you're going straight to your drawing off after dipping in ink, then you can make a really big mess. So before ruining your drawing from doing that, dab it off and blot it a little bit and have lots of napkins on hand. But it is really fun. So, but I'm going to use Sharpie today because that's just what I'm used to. Every once in a while, I've used white ink on top of some of the really darker pieces that I've done. And this is just a jelly roll. I think I got, I don't remember where I got this. Really standard. And it can be you can have really fun effects with it. And I've seen, there's some artists that I follow, and they actually will use this on top of their watercolors and add extra detailing that way. And it's really exciting what you can do with this. And I haven't done much with it yet, but I intend to. So, but I'll go ahead and get started on this piece. So, and then the pencil, mechanical pencil, pretty standard, nothing fancy going on here. I always start out really loose and light. You guys might not even be able to see this very well, but I'm just like filling out the piece. This is a really simple piece, so there's not a lot of like composition that I'm thinking of here. I'm just looking at the single piece of stone here, and just doing a really vague sketch of it right now. You've got the nose in there and just a really light hand right now. So setting in the eyes a little bit, we've got a little shadow under the nose, coming down in a tip, and the mouth coming across here. And I've made my face a little bit bigger than it was on the stone. One thing that I like about this stone is that face that's on it is pretty small, actually, compared to the rock itself. And I really like that it's mostly a sphere, but it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect in life. That's a big lesson that I've learned. Everybody's learned on some level. But also just in my art, there was a time when I was very, very persnickety and had a hard time making mistakes because I just wanted it to be just so. And things are never what you expect them to be. So I have evolved and embraced some changes and things coming out not quite how you expect. And there was also like, there used to be a time when after I do pieces, I would painstakingly come back and erase every little resemblance of graphite, of a pencil sketch on my piece before I called it done. So I do the graphite, the sketch right now, and then I would erase it a little bit and then do the ink on top. And then I'd come back and I'd erase even more to make sure there was no pencil at all because it had to be just ink. And I've actually ruined pieces doing that, where you go to erase it and your ink isn't dry on your paper, and you all of a sudden you have this big ink smear on your paper, and it's like, oh, what was I thinking? Like, so there's some pieces where I erase the pencil some more still, and then there's some pieces where I've just started leaving the pencil on there. I'm just doing squiggly marks right now to kind of suggest the lichen in places here. And again, this is not precise. So if you're following along, just feel free to have fun with it, because that is what art's all about, really, right? We're expressing ourselves and we're having fun. And who cares if it doesn't look like what the picture looked like? One challenging thing sometimes with ink is you're working in just black and white. And recently I have been adding more color to my pieces. I haven't for any of these October pieces, but I've been playing around a little bit with laying down some watercolor on top of my ink drawing, and that can be a lot of fun. I'm just thinking about that right now because like this lichen, we've got this really nice white lichen happening, and then also this kind of burnt orange lichen, and wondering about how to show the difference between the two. And this might be a bit challenging. But we're just gonna do it however makes sense to us. And then just some bigger shading in here. One thing I remember in art school is I would always shy away from shading. And I remember being critiqued on that sometimes, but like your piece is just floating out there. There's no substance for it to sit on. And so I do that more. I don't know. I go back and forth. Sometimes I like it to float. So do whatever makes sense to you.
Lisa, I know you talked a little bit about using watercolor with your ink. Have you tried any of the like colored Speedball inks or any colored ink like that? And if you have, like, what are your impressions of it?
I have used color ink before, but not Speedball. And I really liked it, but then it wasn't light fast. So it faded really, really quickly. And I was really disappointed afterwards. But I haven't used Speedball, so I don't know if that's light fast. So that's one thing that when you're looking at ink, you want to start thinking about is get something that's light fast or marked archival or something like that. And then also on that level, if you're thinking of doing watercolor on top, make sure that it's a waterproof ink that you're using, or you're going to have a big mess. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. I played a little bit, but not with the right inks. And so I was disappointed. But just so everybody knows, this Sharpie is archival. it's light fast, and it's waterproof. So it's a really good one to start with. But yeah, I haven't really played with colored inks very much, but I should. So yeah. But yeah, so I've got my basic little layout here, and I don't need to put in any extra details here because this is just the pencil, and I'm going to do the ink on top. And like I said, it's organic. This is an organic piece. I wish we could pull this up in another little side mirror here, but it's a very organic piece. You can see all the little divots in there. You can see all the little growth formations of the lichen. It's a really cool piece. And one thing I'm thinking is I'm going to probably be using both cross-hatching and stippling for this. And again, this is just a piece of scrap paper. Stippling is just a whole bunch of dots clustered together to make a shadowed effect. You can just barely see that. Hatching is just lines for your shadow. And then cross hatching is you've got your lines, and then you've got contrast lines going across it to make even extra shadow. And when I do lines like this, I like to have my lines curve with the piece so that it accentuates the natural curve of whatever object or piece you're working on. So doing these cross hatching can really help make your piece look three-dimensional, not just with the fact that you're shading it, but with the fact that you're showing the curve of the piece as you're doing it. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing around with this stuff. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and start laying this in. With more complicated objects, I would be thinking of what's in the foreground and working on what's in the foreground first, because that's going to be on top of everything else in the background. But this is very uncomplicated. It's a really simple piece. So I'm going to probably start with a little bit of the lichen and just like have the feathered effect. Lichen's a really interesting thing. It's like, I don't know much about it. I know it's an organism, it's a plant, I think. I don't think it's like a mushroom thing, but it has such interesting growth patterns. And I just love looking at it on tree branches and whatnot. It's really cool stuff. And if you're interested in biology, the little bits that I do know about lichen is they can survive in some of the most extreme conditions on Earth. Like they're a really amazing organism. And extremely slow growing. So you know all this lichen that's growing on this space has been exposed to the elements and just been growing by tiny little millimeters and micromillimeters for who knows how long to get to these little tiny bits that it's in. So when I'm drawing, sometimes I jump around in my pieces, but right now I'm kind of focusing on one spot and then just kind of working my way out. The lichen is going to be the lightest objects on this piece because it's a big gray rock. So I'm keeping in mind that when I'm doing this, I don't want them to be that dark. I'm adding in little bits of texture here and there so that they have some life to them and they have some texture to them. But I'm not going to add much more to the white lichen than that because I want contrast in my piece. And so after I get my lichen laid in, I'm going to be shading in and shadowing the rock itself a lot more. So there's that really nice contrast there. I feel like the more contrast, the more interest you have in your piece, the better. So just working on the lichen. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. I know I said that I went to art school before, and I don't want to sound pompous or anything. It was a high school based art school, but it was a really like life-changing experience for me. And it was only a semester-long program. If anybody has any kids that are in their high school years, definitely push them towards it because it was an amazing experience for me. It's called the Oxbow School of the Visual Arts, and it's actually based in Napa, California. So I got to go and spend half of a school year there. It was really fun. And I learned an extreme amount in a short amount of time. And one thing that I learned that made me really jealous of people who live in bigger cities was having high schools that are focused on other things rather than just your general education is not an uncommon thing. And so I was pretty shocked to find out that, well, yeah, you can go to a high school that's focused on math or on science or on technology or on art or on English. And that's just like something that you get to choose at some point. And I grew up here, so and the high schools here are great, and the schools here are great and all, but to have all those different options was really like mind-blowing for me as a high school student. So
So
do I
Lisa, somebody asked, yeah, you got it.
yeah, did I stipple the outline or actually draw the outline? So with a pencil, I just sketched it out really roughly, but I tried to keep my pencil sketch really light so it is easier to erase in the future, in the past. With this piece, you can see some of these are little marks and some of these are a little bit stippling. So I'm doing a little bit of shading between these bits of lichen here. And that's the bridge of the nose going down. So I'm doing that all in stippling so far. And the lichen has a little stippling and a little line work so far. So I'm going back and forth between a lot of it and trying to keep it organic. So a lot of that line work on the outside of the lichen is curved, kind of fanned out in a way, almost like a fishtail in some sense. I can try and adjust my camera to bring it down a little bit further if you guys think that might be better. No, I'll just keep going. I don't know how much detail you guys can see. If you think I should bring it down, let me know in the chat. Yes, please. Okay. We're gonna see what I can do here. That's a little better. Okay. Ta-da. Can you see that better? Is that better? Yes, hopefully. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. You're not gonna be able to see this as much, so it's a little bit of a bummer, but we'll just work with what we've got here. Looking at where I'm gonna get started here. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of tapping the paper when I'm doing a little bit of the outline of the lichen in places, and that's going to give me a little bit of room to alter it because I'm thinking I'm gonna do most of the stone and stippling. And so if I just tap this in, if I want it to be a little bit different of a shape, then I can tap it in a little bit smaller and not doing a big old line that I can't escape from. So, but again, keep in mind that this is not exact. I am not a scientific illustrator. This is just picking up the essence of the idea of what's going on here and playing with it, making it do what we want, capturing the moments that we like in here and disregarding the ones that we don't feel bring anything to the piece. So you are in control of what you want in your piece. If you don't like something, don't put it in there. And going back to composition, if you're working on a piece and you're working off of photos, then work off of lots and lots of photos and take little bits out of each little photo and add them together and take that bit out and add this bit in and just make it your own that way, because you're in control. It's your piece and it's art, and there's no right or wrong, and do what you want because why not? There's not a lot of things in life where we get to be in control like that. So take advantage. Usually when I work, I have two young boys. So I usually work late at night when everybody's asleep. So if you hear a little background noise, that's my husband and the kiddos watching a movie downstairs. But yeah, I do the majority of my work late at night where I have a little bit of peace and quiet. I do art with my kids sometimes, but it's very abstract and not fine pen and ink stuff. So one thing I do like doing with them a lot is I've got some bits of, I've got watercolor paper that's really huge, and I've never been very comfortable with watercolors myself. It's just something that I haven't taken the time yet to really explore as much as I'd like. And I've got these massive pieces of watercolor paper that somebody gave me years and years ago. And I've been sitting on thinking, like, what am I going to do with these? And just been kind of intimidated by the size and thinking, I can't do anything. I don't know what I'm doing. And then having my boys and trying to keep them entertained and engaged and doing stuff, I finally realized I was like, I've got this giant paper. And so every once in a while, I'll pull it out and I'll lay it down on the floor and we'll pull out watercolors. Sometimes we pull out acrylics or whatever I've got on hand that's relatively easy to clean up. And we just go to town, and it's really fun to watch them do that. That's the majority of the art in my life at the moment. And it's lovely. I really enjoy that. I'm doing these little lines to try and give the lichen a little bit of form. Got like these ridges going on that almost looks like shadows from a sand dune. Usually when I work on art, I usually have music playing in the background, and I was contemplating turning on my CD player here, but I don't want it to be weird with the Zoom stuff. So you guys are just gonna have to suffer through and listen to me rambling. But again, if there's any questions at all, please let me know. Let's turn this a little bit. I don't know what you guys are actually seeing there. One thing when I was young, that really influenced me, I think. My family was one that almost always the TV was on in the background, but thank goodness my mom really liked nature videos and documentaries. So we watched a lot of nature videos and some really cool stuff when I was little. And then the other thing that she would turn on sometimes that I really enjoyed, and I still every once in a while with protests from the boys, I still play it a little bit, is actually Bob Ross, which I think is hilarious, but he's just like such a fun guy to listen to. You can find him on YouTube if you're interested. But he's just such a happy guy and he's so fun and he just has fun with his pieces and just goes for it.
Lisa, as you said that, first things first, everybody's there's Bob Ross on Netflix too, if anybody wants to watch that. Yeah, and somebody just asked how you approach shadowing, and I know you talked a little bit about how you used to like be more afraid with your shadowing, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So focusing on the lichen at the moment, because that's what we're working on, I'm trying to do the shadow to bring out the organicness of it. And so I'm doing a lot of dots and short curved lines to try and accentuate the fact that this is an organic matter that's growing. And you can kind of see that in the photo if you're able to look at that and zoom in. So a lot of my shadowing is just like accentuating the growth pattern there. Shadowing has always been a struggle with me, though. When I said I didn't do much shadowing in the past, a lot of that was shadows casted by objects. So like that leaf that I showed in the very beginning here, looking back, I did a big stippled drop shadow. Well, not very big. In my mind, it's big. Of just stippled shadow casted by that leaf. And that's me challenging myself, because I know the shadow makes things look real and they make things pop from your page and makes it more realistic, because everything casts a shadow. But I've always struggled with that because I feel like I just haven't practiced it enough. And so I do it and then I'm self-conscious and I'm like, did I do that right? Does that look right? I don't know. And that's a lot of just like my own baggage that I'm carrying around. Don't be afraid of your art. Whatever you're doing, don't be afraid of it. Just do it. Just have fun and you learn from your mistakes. That's one thing that I wish was like drilled into my head a little bit more, is sometimes your mistakes are better for you than your successes because you learn so much more from them. Going a little bit philosophical and not very much shadowing here. But going back to shadowing, I start light when I'm working on the shadowing going on in here right now. I'm starting fairly light and I'm layering. So layering is a big way that you can accomplish really interesting shadows and not go too far too fast. Like you're not like just doing a big black blob of a shadow right there. You're doing the stippling. The stippling is really great for that, as you do a layer of dots and then you come back and you do another layer of dots and you do another layer of dots. And then it's a little more, when you look at pieces, you'll see, oh, it's a little bit more shadowed there than there because there's a weird bump in the rock or whatever you're looking at. And so you do more layers and more layers. And sometimes you do just fill in a big blob, but you don't do that till you've already layered a whole bunch on top. So I would say just start light and work your way up to where you want your shadows to end up being. Because if you just lay them down real heavy, real fast, you might realize that you went too far. One thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about a good looking piece, is you want variety. You want light pieces and you want dark pieces of it, and you want mid-tone pieces in your piece. So sometimes I'll lay things down fairly light in the beginning, and then I'll come back and I'll work on my mid-tones and my dark pieces, and then I'll come back and it's just layering. You're just layering a whole bunch. But one good thing is to just step back every once in a while and look at your piece and think, okay, like what am I seeing? What's popping out at me? And like I said, like this is the white lichen in here, and I'm not going to do anything else to that because that's like my lightest piece part of this image, and I want it to stay white like that. But all in here that I haven't touched yet, that's going to be really dark because that's where it's carved down into the eye socket of the stone. And so that's going to be really dark against really light, and that's going to create your contrast. And the shadows really give you that really cool contrast. So don't be afraid of shadowing, but layer it up and go slow and layer it up and back and look and layer it up some more and step back and look. And so just take it slow. Okay, I'm just reading the chat here. So I'm glad people are enjoying this. and any more questions, please shoot them my way. Let me know what inspires you, what you like to do with your art. I know that shadowing talk is probably, or that layering talk, excuse me, is probably going to really resonate with some of our watercolorists because I don't know much about watercolor, but I've been trying to teach myself more and more, and layering is what I always hear preached. And when you're learning about watercolors is you have to layer and to get the cool colors and your effects and everything. So now I'm starting to layer in this eye socket area because I want to kind of show you how I'm planning on doing that. So right now it's all stipples, dot, 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 dot. One thing to keep in mind when you are just going to town with these little dots is if your paper is bowed or not laying down flat on a surface of some sort, then your paper can start to bounce, and which is kind of funny, but it also can kind of mess with your dots. So make sure you've got a nice flat surface to work off of. But yeah, I'm doing layers of dots. I'm coming back and doing more layers. And so like that's going to be more of a mid-tone, I feel like, for this piece. And I want this area to be dark. So I'm going to be adding more and more and more. And sometimes like I'm starting to lose a little bit of like, there's a blob of lichen there that I'm not seeing now because it's in that mid-tone area. I need to pay attention. Where's my lichen? And if you lose your lichen, that's okay. It's part of the rock then. You can have more lichen somewhere else. But yeah, creating contrast in your pieces, the light areas up against the dark areas, that's what's going to create interest. That's going to make people want to look at your piece a little bit more. And that's ultimately what we want, is people to be struck by something, to stop dead in their track and just stare and be like, wow, what's that? And the more interest that you've got going on, sometimes the better, but not always. Sometimes people go way too far with pieces and it's like, can't tell what's going on anymore because it's so complicated and bizarre. So I'm like laying down some more lichen over here. This piece almost reminds me vaguely of the Antarctic. It's like that little duck shape almost. Start seeing weird little squiggly abstract things in your abstract work. And you can see this is kind of like a squiggly broken line that I use to do that, because again, this is an organic medium that we're working with, and we want it to be flowing and we want it to look organic and real and live, and we're not drawing a piece of plastic. So If we were, it'd be very straight, clean lines probably. And you can have interest in anything that you do though. So I see a little bit more of a shadowed spot in the lichen here. So I'm just like laying down that so I can see that later on. This is all going to be shadowed in, and it's looking really dotty in my stuff, but I'm gonna go ahead and add some lines here just to, again, more contrast, having contrast between the surface of the rock versus the lichen. And these dots versus these lines that I'm seeing on the stone is probably different species of lichen and their growth patterns that I'm mixing together because, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm just looking for cool, interesting things. So when I had to choose what to focus on when I went to college, I never completed college, but when I was trying to make that big decision in my life, I was really caught between science and art and not knowing where to go. It was like, I want to do both. I love art and I love science and I don't know what to do. And so for a short time there, I was telling myself, well, I'll just be a scientific illustrator. It'll be perfect. And never quite went down that road. Life always throws you off course sometimes, and but in magical ways too. So, you know. Just adding texture here. So again, thinking about shadows, this is on the shaded side. You have to think about your light source when you're thinking about shadows, obviously. Anybody really into art wanting to do more of this, I would highly suggest practicing as much and as often as possible. And that's one of the great things about this Inktober challenge is it's challenging us to make art every single day. And you just learn so much from that. But again, your light source, where is your light source coming from? For this piece, the light source is coming in this direction. So it's hitting the side of the rock and casting a shadow as we go this way. And so this portion of the face is going to be the lighter bits. And then we've got our shadow in the eye socket here, and it's going to be more shadowed coming down the bridge of the nose. And then everything on this kind of curved side here is going to be much darker than what's going on over here. So keeping your shadows in mind, and I kind of sketched that out a little bit. You can see just a little bit of shadowing that I scribbled in there, like really scribbled. This piece, the stone, was found Nunilchik Island. I'm probably butchering that. But the photo that I saw with it in its natural landscape, it was really grassy tundra, and it was really beautiful, kind of wild grasses growing with little bits of blooms on the tufts of them, and not a lot going on though. It was just like big, flat, grassy terrain, and then this head, the stone head sticking out of the grass. And I took a picture of the information plaque that went with it, and there was an interesting little legend that kind of went along with this. The people had this legend, and they had lost the piece that this rock, they knew it of the legend, knew of it through their legend. And then later on, I think it was in the late 80s, an elder was walking and he stumbled across it. Maybe not stumbled, but he came across it and he found it again. And so it's on loan from that community in Nunilchik to the museum here. And they wrote down the legend, and I'm trying to remember it at the moment. It was kind of vague, but let's see. There was something to do with a person having and it might have been a deity, I'm not sure, having 4 different balls, and they were juggling them in some sort, and then they threw them up high into the air, and they all went in different directions. And so I think the reference was that this is one of those balls that got collided in midair and thrown off into the distance. So if anybody's interested in this piece, it is in the Anchorage Art Museum. And it's, I think, just referred to as Relief Stone Head. So I'm sure you can find out more if you call up the museum and ask them some questions or something, but it's just a really cool piece. Okay, and right now I'm just kind of laying in some organic bits of lichen growing up here. And bits of it over here. One thing that I do to keep myself inspired is I follow different artists on Instagram and whatnot, but I also just have my favorite artists. And I remember growing up, my all-time favorite artist was Van Gogh. He's pretty famous, but I was obsessed with him like throughout junior high and into high school, and still today I've got several books about his work. I've even got a book that's some of his letters to his brother that somebody found and bound into a book, and it's really interesting. It's really kind of a tragic, bit of a dark story there. But one thing that always kind of inspired me, because he was so good at what he did, and thinking like, how could anybody get that good? Because look at that, it's just amazing. Like how he painted the wind and turbulence, and like, I just loved it. He didn't come to art until I think like mid-30s or so. Like he had all these different aspects that he went down, and he tried to be a priest, and he worked in a coal mine, and he did all this crazy stuff, all before ever finding art as a potential career path for him. And supposedly he didn't do very well as far as selling, but look at him today. I mean, but going back to that is like finding that passion in life and pursuing it, and the fact that he didn't come to it for such a long time, and then he got so good. It gives inspiration that if you dedicate yourself to something and you spend the time to pursue it and train and study and get better and better, then you can get there too. It is a learned skill on a huge level. A lot of people think like, oh, you have to, you're born with talent. You either have it or you don't. And that's not true. Like, it is a learned skill. Sure, there's probably some ingrained talent on some level, but I think a huge part is just practice. I think anybody can learn how to do this if they take the time to learn. Just like anybody can learn how to fly an airplane if you take the time to learn. Mostly anybody, maybe not everybody. I should stop talking.
I mean, Lisa, it is 7:30. This has been really beautiful, like watching you do this. It's already been an hour, I know.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten very far, and I figured this probably would happen. So I will finish this tonight, and I will be posting it on my Instagram and tagging Island Artist Gallery in it as well. So if you guys want to see the finished piece, you will get a chance. But any last questions? I can field those.
And can I jump in for just a second? This is Pat.
Please.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Lisa for sharing her artwork with us. And I want to really encourage anyone who's been working on artwork here, if you don't mind us displaying it on our Island Artist Gallery Facebook and Instagram, we would love to have you either post it there as a message or post it and then tag the Island Artist Gallery, because we're really loving seeing what other people are doing with these talks that we've been having. And then I would really also like to invite people to attend the next month Zoom talk, which I believe it's on the 10th. I should know that. Yeah, November 10th. And that one it won't be a demo as much, but I think it's going to be a really fascinating talk about that. Norm Campbell and Steve Laurie, who are two really well-known and much loved Sitka artists, are doing about their time that they spent up at Phonograph Creek, which is a wilderness area, and they spent a week there doing artwork together. And so they're going to share their artwork and talk about the process of art. And I think it's just going to be a really interesting and beneficial conversation for all of us. So I really encourage everyone to join us back in a month for that one. And thank you again, Lisa. It's fascinating. I don't know if I ever have enough patience to stipple like you do, but thank you so much. And thank all of you for coming, joining us.